My name is Colleen Thurston. I'm one of the programmers here. I'm also a filmmaker. I do have a film in production with public media right now. Thank you. And I'm so excited to be sitting here with all of you. As we go down the line, if you all introduce yourselves, Brad will show a trailer for your project after you introduce yourself in the project, and Lee will do the same for you as well. I think you do all you all have mics. So Brad, let's start with you.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing post lunch and everything? My name is Brad Lichtenstein. I've been a filmmaker or in film since 1992. That makes me 55 years old. And I've had a great career in public media, having partnered with ITVS and Independent Lens and Frontline and now American Experience and World Channel on projects. And I'll just mention quickly, Nolan Walker was in the room, and I owe so much to Nolan Walker, who I think it was his first week at ITVS, something like that, pitched him a project called When Claude Got Shot. And 7 years later, we won the Emmy for Outstanding Merit in Documentary with that film, and ITVS was with us every step of the way. So, yes, he gets a round of applause. And then quickly, just to set this up, so with Rachel Raney, who is at PBS North Carolina, and American Experience, we're doing a film right now. It's called Untitled 1898 Wilmington.
The Wilmington 1898 documentary project.
The Wilmington 1898 documentary project. It's about the events that occurred in 1898 in Wilmington, in which the white supremacist Democrats, the Democratic Party, overthrew what was called a fusion government. It was a government of black and white elected officials in Wilmington, North Carolina, and also in other parts of the state. And they did that violently in an insurrection that led to a massacre in which at least dozens and probably hundreds of people were killed. We don't really know because there was no record kept. And we are telling the story both by interviewing historians and a writer who wrote the book Wilmington's Lie, as well as following both white and black descendants whose ancestors took part in what happened during that time. So with that, clip?
Yeah, roll clip.
The leaders of the white supremacy campaign in Wilmington decided they needed a really effective speaker to give a red-hot speech at Thalian Hall. So they chose Colonel Alfred Moore Waddell, who was a Confederate lieutenant colonel during the Confederacy, and he actually became the face of the white supremacy campaign in and around Wilmington.
Alfred Waddell was essential in this. That speech that Alfred Waddell gave in Thalian Hall, where we are right now, that holds 600, but there were over 1,000 people in here. This is what he said. Shall we surrender it to a ragged rabble of Negroes led by a handful of white cowards? No, 1,000 times no. We will have no more of the intolerable conditions under which we live. We are resolved to change them if we have to choke the current of the Cape Fear with carcasses. Negro domination shall henceforth be only a shameful memory to us and an everlasting warning to those who shall ever again seek to revive it. This is a call for white domination and genocidal violence.
I just wanted to add, sorry, to mention my incredible co-director, Yoruba Richin, who is making this film with me. And I also wanted to mention the music you heard is from Rhiannon Giddens. She's, for those who don't know, won the Grammy for Best Folk Artist. She's a black folk artist who has taken a lot of the music ethnicology into the discussion about who and how we created the folk music canon and bringing the banjo and those lessons back in. She's writing some songs for the film. And then the last thing I just wanted to say was that was from our demo too. So the movie will actually be a little different.
All right, Rachel?
Hey everyone, good afternoon. This has been a really wonderful couple of days, and happy to be here with you. My name is Rachel Raney. I work at PBS North Carolina, which is the statewide PBS network in North Carolina. I'm Director of National Productions, which means that really my job is to work with both our staff producers, independent producers, content creators in amplifying the stories of North Carolina, but also just the American South writ large, to the PBS system. And I feel very passionate about that work because I believe in having authentic stories that are told from within the place, in kind of place-based storytelling, and how important that is. I guess we're going to dig into this a lot, but in terms of talking about partnerships, but I have been in public media for many years. I'm not going to maybe date myself as directly as Brad did, but let's just say we're peers. I have a long history of working with independent producers and filmmakers, both on the West Coast when I worked for many years at KQED and at PBS North Carolina. That's been something that I've been there 8 years now and have really done a lot of work to kind of throw the doors of the station open and really court these kinds of collaborations and partnerships. And the only way that we can really do that and make it happen is by partnering with all of these other wonderful organizations across public media. So. Oh, and one last thing, I'm sorry. Just to explain something, I also executive produce a series called Real South, which is a showcase of documentary films about the American South, and have also had the extreme pleasure of working with Lee Liu over the last 3 years on her project. So.
Indeed. Hi, everyone. My name is Lee. I'm originally from Sugar Land, Texas, and our project here at the festival is our 3-part docuseries, A Town Called Victoria. And we had our world premiere on Sunday, which was incredible. We had a stage full of people from the community reflecting and watching and conversing with you all here in this community. We have Sana right here from Victoria, Texas, who's also a CAAM fellow, so shout out to Sana in the crowd. And this series is about a mosque in Victoria, Texas that got burned down the night the travel ban was enacted in 2017. And this is a co-production of Real South, Independent Lens, with vital support from CAAM and Firelight Media, Islamic Scholarship Fund, and a whole host of other great organizations. And we're really excited to show you the trailer, which is our world premiere of our trailer as well. Double whammy, so.
One of the things I remember when we first moved here is the sunshine.
In the 22 years I've been here, I've loved every minute of it, and they have loved me back.
Good luck. Good luck.
Victoria has been very good to us, raising our children in this town. I don't think we have had any disturbing kind of relations with anybody.
90,000 people living in this county. We're still a rural area.
There's always been racism, and it goes way back.
American people were being blown up, shot at, whatever, by Muslims. It's one of the reasons that Trump got elected. He promised that he would do something about it.
At 2 a.m., I got a call from our imam. He was crying. He said, "Our mosque is on fire. Please God, let it be an accident."
It was no coincidence that the fire was on the night of the travel ban.
25-year-old Mark Vincent Perez will remain in detention after learning about his possible connection to the mosque fire.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a hate crime.
I just never thought that somebody who is classified as a minority like us would carry on such an act. Justice is going to take its course. All we can focus on is the rehabilitation of our congregation.
We are not succumbing to pressure, we're not succumbing to hate.
They're praying that this is going to be the time when everybody says we're all in it together. But I don't think that's the case.
This is a year of the faith being tested.
There's a missing link in this young man's life that we don't know yet.
May God give them peace if he is found guilty of this crime.
Bless Texas! Thank you, Omar. Victoria, how are you doing?
I am a Muslim and I'm an American and I have every right like anybody else.
This is South Texas. Progress is made one funeral at a time.
At the end of the day, you look back and you say, well, did I prevail? Did I let the tragedy sucker me, or did I sucker the tragedy?
Yeah, that's a really incredible trailer. Congratulations. I don't know if they mentioned, but it's going to be on IL on PBS November 13th and 14th. So definitely watch the film. I'm Sapana, Sakya. I'm the Talent Development and Special Projects Director at the Center for Asian American Media, or CAAM. And I work with talented emerging young makers like Sana, and then we have two other fellows here, Mel and Nash from CAAM. Hello. Sorry to embarrass you. And then Andy, who was on the Works in Progress screening earlier, Andy Sarjahani is also a CAAM fellow. I think a lot of my work is about, working with filmmakers and meeting them where they are at, and figuring out what they need. And for me, it's often rooted in the Asian American community context, but I feel like any one of our partners in the Multicultural Alliance, we all work with everyone in the system. And Rachel and Nick at Real South have been really wonderful partners, as has ITBS and PBS and Firelight and CPB. I think none of the work at PBS would be possible, Adam at PBSDS, without these partnerships and these relationships. A lot of our work is in relationship building and network building. So I'm really excited to be on this panel. And come up and talk to me if you'd like to learn more.
Sapana's really fun to hang out with, so I think that's why that's why I would be a fellow. That trailer was really greatly, I just wanted to say, I haven't seen that either, and it was really powerful. I'm the series producer for Real South. My name is Nick, and I've been working with Rachel at first at PBS North Carolina since 2017 in various roles and responsibilities, but increasingly and almost exclusively now with Real South. We are a PBS series that has had many evolutions in our very short life of almost 9 years, and we mostly work in acquisitions, working with features and short films, and increasingly when grant funds magically appear up from the ground like little mushrooms, we are able to work with really talented filmmakers from the South, like Lee Lu, like some other filmmakers in the audience who are screening work here, I and Samuel, Andy as well, and hopefully many more of you too. And I see other filmmakers whose work we've licensed, like Nathan. So there's really talent in this area. I'm so glad that more and more opportunities are presented, like these forums with Ken and CPB and PBS stepping up and showcasing our other work and allowing us the chance to talk. So,
thank you all so much. Thank you for being here again. Let's start out talking about kind of the genesis of the partnerships on a town called Victoria. So Lee and Nick and Rachel. Town Called Victoria has a really interesting co-production between Independent Lens and Real South. How did that come about?
Nick, you want to take that?
Sure. You can correct me when I'm wrong. So it starts back with, again, Lee. First, this is a filmmaker-led. Lee had been ingrained in this community for years. Soon after the event that really started it all, the arson. And through her fellowships and being involved as a filmmaker independently with Firelight and things, was able to connect with Rachel, and Rachel then, once we were able to see a pilot and early work from Lee, early cuts of the film and the series, really have earnest discussions with her about how this could come to Real South and how we might be able to work together to, one, I think first and foremost, raise money. Real South is a platform for films, but we also are open and increasingly looking for other opportunities to get our own work seen by other people and different audiences that don't come to us directly. And so with that, we were reaching out to PBS, who had always kind of left the light on for us to come knocking if Rachel ever found something that might be a pop-out special for a primetime showcase, separate from our sort of annual series. And then from there, looking at other opportunities for funding with ITVS, who saw the work, saw how passionate we were, and again, saw the amazing, incredible story that Lee was telling and wanted to get involved and talk to us about how this could be really the first time Real South and Independent Lens would be able to work together on a project.
And of course, CAAM had come in as an early partner / funder as well while we were in those first conversations with PBS. I think what's, as a docuseries, it's still a little bit unusual in our system, in the PBS system. Some of the strands that really showcase independent film are really built around one-off documentaries. And so when Lee came to us with this really ambitious project, it was going to be multiple parts, we realized really early on that it was going to take a lot of us coming together, pooling our resources to be able to support the work in the way that it needed to be supported to actually bring it to the screen. So.
And then, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Lee, or?
I think it was such a journey. This was 6 years, of life, and all y'all, we know what that's like to be working on a project for so long. There was a filmmaker here talking about a 10-year journey on her project. And it really just took such a village of support at every stage, from the development to the production to the post and now to the distribution. And I look back on just even our credits and I get really emotional because it really took every single person in this family on this production to make it happen. So yeah, it's a really great reminder of how partnerships can get your work seen and told and made.
Thank you for that. And then Brad, you and Rachel, what was the genesis of the Wilmington project and how did you all team up?
Well, I'll start. So not to get too in the weeds here, but I think like a lot of broadcasters or folks in public media, after George Floyd was murdered in 2020, I think we were kind of at the station just thinking, what are we doing? What could we be doing? What do we have to contribute? And I had recently learned about the events in Wilmington in 1898. We had screened a historical fiction film about the events, which really wasn't something that we would normally acquire and even broadcast, but we did. But it wasn't the kind of thing that you would necessarily take to PBS, right? And so with some of my team on my national productions team, we started to think about let's see what's been done on it. And sure enough, what we discovered was there hadn't been a really ambitious feature-length documentary film to tell the story of what happened in Wilmington. And the longer that we've been working on this, I kind of have had feelings, now and again of wow, why didn't we, I'm saying we, I've been at the station 8 years, but I was just kind of wondering why we hadn't done it years earlier, the 100th commemoration of these events. I don't like to say the word anniversary. The commemoration would have been in 1998, right? But as it turns out, timing is everything, and I think this is an actually really amazing time for this film to come out, and for this story to be brought to light, this history. And so, in thinking, who could we find to bring this to the screen with us? Who could we work with to direct the film? Brad and Yoruba had recently done a project for Frontline called American Reckoning, which if you haven't seen, I absolutely highly recommend that you see this this film, and I just thought, well, they seem like the dream team. And it was a history film, and it was a story about extreme racial injustice, and while they were in completely different eras in American history, I just saw a lot of parallels. And then I've known Brad and admired his work for many years, and then was getting to know Yoruba's work too.
That's the story.
Okay.
I'd love to hear one day why you said yes, though.
Yoruba and I said yes right away. I mean, like Rachel mentioned, I've known her, so I trust her. And I think also I'm from the South, and so I have a desire to tell stories about the South. And I love Yoruba, so any chance to work with her is a dream.
Sapana, you mentioned CAAM, and you mentioned the National Multicultural Alliance. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a group of 5 partner organizations who fund documentaries for public television. So there's the Center for Asian American Media, there's Vision Maker Media, Latino Public Broadcasting, Pacific Islanders and Communication, and Black Public Media as well. I'm hoping you could shed a little bit of light on what a partnership looks like when you're working with one of those, one of the alliance members, and what that broadcast agreement entails.
Whoa. Okay. Do we have time? Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for mentioning the alliance. I think for a lot of filmmakers out there who are looking for an initial partner, I think the National Multicultural Alliance is a really great place to start. Asian American filmmakers can reach out to CAAM, Black filmmakers. I think the reason why we exist as 5 separate organizations is because we serve our own communities, and each community needs are different, right? And even just within the Asian American community, I think the diversity is so vast, and what we try to do, like I said earlier, is really not just elevate the stories that are easy, but sometimes we also, for example, the reason why we did our regional initiative starting with the South is because we knew demographically a lot of Asian Americans living and moving to the South, but they were not visible, right? And so because we have this mandate of representing Asian Americans across the country, we wanted to focus and highlight regions that were underrepresented. And that's why we're here in the South. We are a national organization. We're a small organization, but we do attempt to represent, I think, the diversity within our communities across the South, and not just in the major metropolitan areas, and not just the demographics that make up the majority, for example, of the Asian American community, and that might be Chinese or Japanese, communities that have been here perhaps for 4 generations, but also more recent immigrants like the South Asian immigrants, now like more communities from the Middle East are also coming in, refugee communities in the Midwest and other regions in the country. That didn't quite answer your question, but I mean, we do fund all of the organizations have an open call for documentary, and that's the most direct way to receive funding, and that's for public television licensing of a film. But each of our organizations also do oftentimes shorts film funding. We also have other types of resources. CPB is our primary funding resource, but we also each individually have other foundational resources, and sometimes we are able to fund development work or works in development and out-of-round funding as well. So I would really encourage you to reach out. Everyone is pretty accessible online. I'm happy to make an introduction as well. And everyone also has their own, sorry, I'm going on and on, training programs that are very unique, and we have our fellowship program, but Black Public Media has the Pitch Black and the 360 mentorship lab that they have. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there. But, when you contract with us, it's a very specific type of, I guess, public media contract. So It isn't a grant per se, so that's one thing that's really important to understand. I think when we fund your project, oftentimes it's to license your project for public media, and that's the North American broadcast license, which is different from, and so that in many cases, perhaps precludes distribution in streaming or other commercial platforms. But I feel like, the public media system really has a lot to offer communities of color, especially, before any of the other places had diverse programming. I feel like PBS really has taken an early risk and done experimental programming, diverse programming, and had those mandates in place. So I feel like this is where we belong.
Brad, you've also worked with the Multicultural Alliance.
For this project, we're working with Black Public Media. For when Claude got shot, we worked with Black Public Media. For a lot of the people who work at 371 Productions, we've done projects with Firelight and Homegrown. For other projects, we've worked with lots of other entities. I was just going to say, you brought up the contract, and I think there's not enough time on this panel, but if there are filmmakers out there who are interested in talking about public media contracts, I'm happy to talk to you about those contracts. Also, another thing I was going to say is you've probably during the forum learned how complex the public media system is. And one of the things I have found really helpful is to make sure that you are over communicating to all of the entities that you're involved with, because it's not something to take for granted that if you have a grant with Black Public Media and you also are working on ITVS and maybe there's CPB money in the project or whatever the constellation may be, that everybody is talking to everybody and keeping people up to date on your project. So it's a good thing to take initiative and be strategic about managing that flow of conversation all the way through your project.
I think that on that point, I just wanted to, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of partnerships and how, Lee had not worked in public media before this project. And oftentimes as makers, even experienced, filmmakers and storytellers come into public media, there's definitely a learning curve. Not a learning curve about storytelling necessarily, but a learning curve about this kind of messy, wonderful, ecosystem that we have going on. And I know that Lee had some meetings. She's developing an ambitious docuseries with some of the streamers and other folks, and it's just a really big difference that as she's partnering, with like PBS or public media, we're actually like 6 or 7 very different entities that have a lot in common, but also, differences. Some of us have slightly different missions. We have different, funding models. And so at some points I just was like, oh God, poor Lee. she's really having to, learn a lot about, the sausage being made, right? And yeah.
Yeah. It was definitely a journey on this one. And Brad, you used the word constellation. That's a great word. Ecosystem also comes to mind because we felt like where we belonged in this, really intricate ecosystem of relationships and histories between the organizations, the money, where it all came in. And it's a very challenging, complexing system, especially if you haven't done projects in the public media sphere before regarding financial reporting, even the waterfall of financials and how we can, keep continuing on with our production. But it all came together, and we all are now celebrating the release of the series. So I'm really, really grateful for that.
I want to say something. Sorry, Sapana. That Sapana said about the NMCA being, really, I think, one of the best places to start. In terms of like you have an idea, you're looking at starting in public media, really developing relationships. I think the NMCA organizations as well as public television stations are really great entrees into this public media world because I think you can some filmmakers have really great, they're committed to this one idea, and maybe that idea is so strongly connected to them, they're ready to just apply for grants, and they're really in this fundraising place. But I think that before that, if you're just in development, if you're thinking about ways in which you're wanting to both develop your career, but also some sort of content, I think coming to some of these these organizations early is a really great sort of slow pathway, because I think, maybe some of you think about public media being a relatively slow kind of content or whatever, but I think relationships are built really slowly, intentionally. And I think part of these organizations and the way you sort of build a career, we're all trying to do this over the long term. And so I think that's an important mentality to approach any kind of relationship, but especially with public media. We've been around since the 60s and some newer organizations and whatnot, but I don't think there's been many other media companies and many other new technologies and new streamings that are coming and going and changing very fast, and you can get a little whiplash by trying to keep up with that. But public media, and for better or for worse, we're still here, we're still actively focused on relationships with independent makers and trying to work together with you all to find paths forward for career sustainability and new models and new ways of successful storytelling.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will add that my first source of funding for the documentary that I've been working on for 5 years was Vision Maker Media. And they provided, I think it was about $16,000 in research and development funding. So I was then able to produce a work sample and a treatment that led to additional funding. So that was kind of my entree in with this film. Lee and Brad, you all actually both mentioned a very important partner that have supported a lot of documentaries and especially public television, public media documentaries, Firelight Media. And I know we have Chloe. I saw her earlier. She snuck out. She left.
We love you, Chloe. Come back.
Chloe Walters-Wallace is around, but from Firelight. And Lee, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, what are the benefits of partnering or receiving support from an organization like Firelight? Who have been some other organizations who've supported you? And in addition to funding, mentorship, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think Firelight Media is incredible. It has been the most impactful, life-changing artist workshop intensive I've ever done. And because this work is so lonely, you're so siloed all the time, you really have to draw upon your own tenacity and grit to film another day, get that extra $5,000 to cover this next thing, because time doesn't wait for anybody. And when you're in a room of people who have experienced the same things you have, especially if you're a person of color, if you're marginalized, and you're telling these stories about your own communities or speaking nearby in regards to this film for me and Victoria, I just really felt like these people were and are my family. We still text each other all the time. We help each other completely without any selfishness at all, because it really gives you a sense of home and a sense of a base to say, I'm not in this alone. In the darkest and lowest moments when the hard drive's not working and you don't have your equipment, you just know that these people are going to be there to support you no matter what. So huge love to Firelight. The first money in for our project was an organization called the Islamic Scholarship Fund. Now, after the travel ban in 2017, they opened a grant for stories about Muslim communities by any maker. And without their first $15,000, we would not be here today. And that has been a day one relationship with not only their entire organization, but the filmmaker at the center of their grants system, which is, her name is Iman, and she's incredible. She has a great film called Americanish coming out. It's a rom-com, Muslim-American rom-com. It's amazing. Awesome. And they've been so integral because they really gave us that cultural literacy when we needed it. Even small scenes like, are we getting the positions of the prayer right? Or take a look at our title sequence and let us know if anything doesn't ring true to you. And growing that relationship for 6 years as friends and as allies has been truly remarkable.
I'll add from a kind of a different perspective. I'm a white man who leads an organization that is very diverse. And so I've been partnering with a lot of the different organizations, I'll name some others too, to offer professional development for our staff. So for instance, Seed and Spark has run campaigns, particularly for BIPOC filmmakers, and we paid for and formed relationships with them that led to two of our staff getting a project with them called Black Girl Training. And then we had one of our filmmakers go to the homegrown workshops in Chicago that Firelight put on. Marcia Smith from Firelight has been like a sounding board from day one at 371 Productions, just, working out all kinds of different ways to support our filmmakers at 371. And then Sundance Documentary Fund, I have to mention too, because they have been a huge source of support. In fact, one of our producers right now is going through the Producers Lab track or fellowship with them. And all of these, pay off for decades as people make new networks and grow new skills. And, I think what Lee said is exactly right. The bonds for mentorship are so strong. And really, that's only in this not-for-profit documentary and PBS ecosystem. I have a foot in the commercial world too, as does Lee actually. And I mean, there's some support systems there, but it's also much more transactional and a lot less relational, I would say. Would you say? I mean,
yeah, or they're towards an end goal, like getting your first episode of television or getting staff in a writer's room and all of that. But I think building community, especially for telling stories that we care about, it's a piece of us. There's nothing like these orgs that we're talking about.
And I'll say, Yoruba and I were just talking about this the other day, is that we're so happy to have a public media project because the massive consolidation across the commercial television and film landscape has meant a lot less opportunities for documentaries to find a place to get funded. And I think the alarming stat out of Sundance last year was only one film, I think, one documentary sold out of the festival, which is pretty astonishing.
Was that the survey out of, was it Distribution Advocates?
Probably.
Yeah, yes. I will say, here in Arkansas, we are so lucky to have a public television station that works very closely with local filmmakers and is producing original content. Southern Storytellers is going to be premiering on Friday here, and Courtney Pledger. I'm trying to shout out these people that aren't in the room anymore. Courtney Pledger leads Arkansas PBS and very, like I said, very supportive of local filmmakers. And Rachel, I'm wondering if you could provide any advice for filmmakers who might want to approach a PBS station and pitch a collaboration.
Yeah, that's a great question because what is that saying? If you know one PBS station, you know one PBS station. There are a lot of similarities, but we also are all different and have different we serve different communities, we have different content priorities, et cetera, and we certainly all have different ways of approaching us, with ideas or collaborations. I can say at PBS North Carolina, I mean, one thing I would say is that I just want to warn folks, because we truly are interested in working with independent content creators. We have to. It's part of our mission. It's a way in which we can do storytelling that we can't do on our own, that we can access communities and stories and places that we can't be everywhere, all at once. So it's absolutely essential to what we do that we do it. We also just don't have that secret pile of money that's just sitting there waiting for when you come in and have that meeting and great, here you go, So in the same way that we have to raise money to do our own projects, if you do approach a PBS station, the likelihood is that you would need to join arms with them and raise money together to bring that to fruition, which isn't to say that we don't have resources, because we do. And we also have relationships. And one of the, I think, a really important thing that we have is also legitimacy. I've been an independent maker, and sometimes it's just really, really hard to be out in the world and making a project, and people just don't know who you are, right? And even if you are really talented and you have the best intentions, having a relationship with an established, trusted media company, which, by the way, I don't know if any of you all know this, but PBS is the #1 trusted media brand in America, year after year. Well, that's what they always tell us at the PBS annual meeting. I actually haven't seen the data, but that's what they tell us. So there are definite things that we can offer you, even if it isn't writing you a check for the full budget of your project. So I just wanted to mention that. But the other thing I would say is that spend a little bit of time, seeing what that station does in the, on air, what kind of content are they producing? What do they do in the community? Which doesn't mean that you have to do that, right? But there could be opportunities where you say, oh, wow, they do a show on X. There's some connective tissue there. But also maybe you see, wow, they really aren't doing this thing, and that's what I could bring to it, right? There's a void, there's a vacuum there of a particular story or community. So, just kind of, go in with, an open mind and finding lots of different ways that you could collaborate with the station, and do a little bit of homework ahead of time. I wanted to mention real quick, you mentioned Arkansas PBS. They are a wonderful partner of Real South. Real South, which Nick was talking about earlier, which is our PBS documentary strand that showcases amazing films and storytelling from all over the American South, is actually a collaboration of 9 different Southern pubcasters. It's very unique in the system. It's very unlike our wonderful peers, Independent Lens and POV. And so we have the stations in the Carolinas, Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana is one of our co-producing partners, Louisiana Public Broadcasting, all the way up to Virginia and Texas and Tennessee. So, it's a little bit of a miracle, but all of these stations come together. We all contribute, both cash resources and in-kind resources to then support the films that come to Real South. So that in and of itself is a really monumental partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more question before we open it up to Q&A. And this is for Lee and Brad. For both of you all, what do you wish you knew about partnerships before undertaking your current projects? And what can you share with other filmmakers who are trying to figure out or navigate the system?
Do you want to go first?
Oh boy. I think I just wish I would tell myself to take it a step at a time, because I couldn't quite wrap my head around it in the beginning because it was so vast and so different fiefdoms everywhere, in a sense, of the system. So I'm still learning, with the series coming out in November, even seeing the things like I'll Pop Up or Real South event or what's our own impact campaign. It's been an ongoing education. So I would just tell myself to take it a step at a time. And it's okay if you don't know the answer, ask.
I would answer the question more as like when I was 28 and starting. And I think the thing that I would tell myself is to do more of what I do now, which is just to listen and to really try to understand all of the people that you're interacting with, whether it's a foundation or it's a station or it's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting or it's a PBS or strand like ITVS. Is try to really understand everybody's just a person, they're in the system, they're all on the same team, but they all have really different rules that they're playing by. And that if you listen and understand what each entity is trying to achieve, like how they're trying to get to the same place with you, but they have to take a different path maybe, you can stop wasting a lot of time complaining or being mad that something's not happening as fast or with as much money as you wanted at the time. And you can also try to figure out, how to, I always think of it as like try to figure out how to solve the problem together or solve their problem and get towards your goal with everybody still your friend by the end, as opposed to, it's frustrating to be an independent filmmaker. It's hard, but it's something you love, and most of you, I'm sure, agree with me. You wouldn't trade it for the world. So just everybody's on the same team. We're just all kind of getting there a different way.
Questions from you all? I can keep going. No questions about partnerships, visibility, funding? Yes, okay. Sana, and then we'll go to you. The question was, at what point did you join in partnership in your projects?
This one has been very unusual because it was like a commission, and I've been very lucky because Rachel has led the fundraising. I mean, we've all on the team contributed a lot to proposals and so forth. So let me answer your question about a different project. So I mentioned Nolan Walker is in the room. And I pitched him the movie When Claude Got Shot right at the beginning. And of course, there's a whole process at ITVS. So Nolan was great in terms of being transparent, but we were in touch as he went through the process to get funding. At the same time, I talked to Nolan and other people at ITVS about foundations that I wanted to talk to. I knew a little bit about which foundations, are interested. I knew enough not to waste time with foundations that don't support this kind of stuff. And I think a kind of watershed moment was an introduction to a group at the Sundance Documentary Fund that was specifically interested in our issue, which was gun violence prevention, and invited us to a meeting with about 8 projects and introduced us to funders there. And that was a huge jump start. But then, we had a huge lag in funding for a while. We couldn't really keep our edit room going for a period of time. And, Nolan and others were really helpful in, I would say, like, I have a project at Ford, I have a proposal. Would you be willing to make a phone call and just help keep pushing all the pieces forward on the chessboard? So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that experience was one where there were so many different funders and partners. Black Public Media came in at a time when we just needed to hire a new editor. And that money made all the difference in the world. So we could have a new demo to go raise more money. And all these conversations, I was having with everybody at the same time. Some of them came to fruition sooner than others. Some never came to fruition, but they're friends.
Our project was very unique because it was a series. And even to this day, there's not a lot of grants, or not as much grants for series work, episodic work, than for your feature length or short form. So it took a long while to figure out who we could even ask for funding or support. The kind of journey for us is, as I mentioned, Islamic Scholarship Fund, other entities like Firelight Media, Austin Film Society also was a huge help in the beginning. So through these smaller grants and these organizations, we were able to basically shoot the entire thing. So we went through entire production with these smaller grants, these entities, and support in-kind services from hard drives, camera equipment, my friends from, the crew side coming in sometimes to help as well. And then once we had all the footage, that's really when I got to meet the people on this stage. I met Don Young at CAAM. I met the both of you also at a Firelight event, I believe, as well. And then I met some people from ITVS, and that's all. They really came on board in post, and it was like 2, almost 3 years of just purely post-production, 5 days a week, 10 hours a day. It was tough. But yeah, I think it really took all those people. And then Ford Foundation at a certain point came in, and some other organizations for finishing. And we also have impact funds from Firelights and from other entities as well, as we take this to communities around the country. So it was really just taking it a step at a time. Sometimes you're like at the base of the mountain looking up, and then you climb that mountain, you have another mountain, you know, and I just had to take it a step at a time, and without too much to say, like, you got to look at the bigger picture. You got to look at why you're doing this, and that just helped every moment of the way.
We had another question up here. Yeah.
Could you speak more to, like, I guess each of your advice on when to say no to a partnership? That could be at a particular time in the process. They're not the right partner for that stage you're at, or obviously in every industry, grants and funding is very challenging because they put restrictions on you and they have a certain vision and intention that might not jive with yours. But we heard yesterday, right, take the first offer you get because you're going to get zero more. So how do you balance being true to your vision with being an independent filmmaker who just needs to be funded, but it could derail your entire passion project to be with the wrong partner?
I would say whatever you can do to keep your artistic integrity. This is your blood, sweat, and tears. This is your years into your project. And there's going to be lots of shiny things along the way that sign away those rights. Creatively, your IP, everything, your copyright. And they're not the ones in the trenches, you are. So I always just feel, especially in early stages, there's a lot of development deals that have hidden clauses, like they'll own what you pitch sometimes. And just to be super cautious about that stuff. And we went and we pitched out, and some people wanted the feature version or wanted something else. But having to talk to other filmmakers who had gone to those streamers or those companies and hearing horror stories of being locked out of the editing room or just completely taken off a project creatively. I think just talking to one another to say, hey, you applied for this thing, you work with this partner, how was that for you? It helps you understand your own decision that you'll have to make.
I saw another hand somewhere. Yes.
I was wondering if there's any envisioning of how to simplify this process. You know, it seems like such a complex, personalized journey and like layers and stuff. And I would love to hear if there's been any vision of how to simplify.
I would just say to find people who are experienced and can help guide you, because there's no magical way. Are you saying like to the system how to simplify? They're not going to simplify things. But well, because there's a different origin story to every entity within the constellation or ecology, whatever you want to call it, and each have to report to different entities financially and also on mission. And so, and it's not a bad thing that we're talking about public media, that it's so hard to navigate in a way, because the reason is it's more democratic, and you are dealing with different entities that are driven by mission, which changes, your relationship with those entities. And so I think the way to solve the complexity is more to form partnerships or relationships or have advisors who've been through it and can help you navigate, because believe me, I've been at many gatherings within the system about how do we simplify, how do we, and the outcomes are not as good as, what exists. So I don't think that's going to happen in our lifetimes necessarily. Let's just hope that it stays around for our lifetimes. That's the thing, is to fight for public media because of the important role it plays. I'll tell you, the other night we were at the Emmys for American Reckoning, and over, other entities were winning for this category and that category, and you could tell how white those teams were, and the issues that we talk about in terms of decolonization, in terms of people making stories about their own communities and stuff. That's resonating here, but out in the other parts of the media landscape, with the exception of maybe HBO, I don't see a lot of real walking the walk going on. So there's a lot of reasons to tolerate the lack of simplicity, because the values here are what people are genuinely committed to.
I think that's a really great filmmaker perspective. Just to speak on behalf of someone within an organization and knows organizations, I would say that the question for us isn't about necessarily simplicity, but about transparency. And I think that is where public media does and has led, especially working with independents and trying to create opportunities and ways in which you know what you're doing and how to, at least online reading how you can submit or what their effort is to change. I don't, have you ever seen a link to submit your film to Netflix? I mean, I think there's grant opportunities. There's
Or to
ways,
get the numbers from them?
Oh, well, yeah, that's alone, but I won't go that far. But I do think it is about transparency. I mean, we are also mostly nonprofits, and the accountability that we have to, different governmental regulations is different than a corporation too. So I just think that for us, it's about transparency for the filmmakers and making sure that you're at least aware of like, hey, by the way, we're up here, like all of us saying how hard it is, and we're not trying to like laugh it off and put you and make it seem like, oh yeah, talk to me backstage and we'll be great while I disappear into my black car. It is hard, but we're willing to like work with you to do it, and that's what we're transparent about.
I will add that there have been some steps made to streamline, especially like the funding process. Yeah. The IDA, the International Documentary Association, and Sundance Institute partnered, probably like 7 years ago or so, to create the what's now called the nonfiction core application. And then that's what a lot of these funding entities are using, are these core questions that make up a wider proposal to consider for funding. So at least there's that.
One final question.
Yeah, one final question, sure.
It's similar to what she asked. I just want to know what's the downside and trade-off in forming a partnership?
With public media? Do you want me to go first?
I mean, I think we're all expecting documentary to take a long time, but I think in public media, it also can take a long time just to cobble together what little funds you're going to have and change your budgets to acknowledge that this is not necessarily going to be the big money-making project, but not everything we're doing needs to be that either. I think maybe we also, as independents, can reframe what profits and what success looks like in a way that decolonizes but also decapitalizes a lot of that, the motivation behind making something.
Yeah. I think it's also about trying to simplify the processes, because you have a crew to take care of. And also we deserve a living wage while we do this work. So that's the realness that we face every day. So what can we do to make sure that these projects, this creative energy, because a big thing for us is we start and we stop. We get on a roll, we're in the edit, I found my perfect editor, money's no longer there. I have to let this person go. I really hope this person can come back when I do have the funds. And that kind of start and stop, it does take a toll on you. So what are ways we can simplify? What are ways we can take care of everyone in this, hot labor summer, as we've been saying? Like, it's true. How do we make this sustainable and livable for everyone in the documentary field?
I would say, rather than thinking like downside, upside, I mean, there's basically like 3 paths to distribution. There's the public media world or nonprofit world with grants, so forth, partnerships. There's, doing whatever you can to get your film to a major festival that sells, like Sundance, which I think the odds are at this point 1.5%, and having a big sale. And you heard me say last time there weren't any big sales, really. But that'll change. That'll go back at some point. Or to have projects set up, which usually is if you have an agent, that's later in career, and have entities that fund things come together, hear your pitch, and so forth. But I think one of the things and then if there's a downside just to think about, or it's not so much a downside, but something to think about, is the contract for most of the public media entities that do distribution are going to require not just the North American broadcast, but usually a whole array of other rights that they may or may not exploit. So it's something just to prepare yourself for and to have a conversation about too. Maybe there's some wiggle room. Maybe there's some ways to push on the system to help in distribution in some of those platforms that were not normally exploited in one way or another. So it's something to think about. And then, the last thing I would say is what is so rich about this system is that there are so many levels at which filmmakers are nurtured. You saw the last session with Works in Progress through, a regional series that is supporting with money and with mentorships and network and connections. That's so valuable. So everything has upsides and downsides.
I would add one more thing to that. That is it's a reality. My production contract with Vision Maker Media, which is one of the Multicultural Alliance, stipulates that once I receive the funding from them, I have 3 years to complete the film. Now, they don't provide the entirety of the budget. So then that puts extra pressure on me to say, okay, I have to finish this within 3 years or else I have to repay the funding. So then I have 3 years to raise the rest of the money. So that's been a challenge. I think at this point they've probably given around a third. Yeah, maybe a little bit under, maybe like a quarter of my budget. Yeah. I know we're over, but thank you all so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I hope it's been beneficial to some of you all. And I will turn it back over to Ken.
Could I just, sorry, just before Ken comes on, could I just thank this gentleman and this woman here for the signing? It looks so exhausting always and amazing.